Hello, lovely people. Once again, thank you for stopping by our channel. In this video, as I promised earlier, I'm going to share some thoughts on what goes into writing the personal statement for the Global Talent Visa through the research and academic routes.
A new place, a new home for a while. Let me feel alive.
The Global Talent Visa, as some of you might have come across, is a new visa scheme that the government has introduced to attract people who are considered leaders or potential leaders in three main areas: academia and research, technology and innovation, and I think in arts and culture. And in this particular video, what I'm talking about is the peer review process, putting together a personal statement for the peer review process in order to secure an endorsement which you would use to apply for the Global Talent Visa. Now, the personal statement is supposed to be, there's a word limitation, I think it is 7,000 characters or so, which essentially it's about 2 pages maximum. So you just have to bear that in mind, and you have to remember that you are also attaching your CV. So the personal statement is not meant to be a regurgitation of your CV. It's meant to be something about you that probably CV hasn't captured, but then something that makes you, it clearly depicts or demonstrates that you're a global talent. Yes, so I'll walk you through how I approached my personal statement. First of all, I have to mention that personal statement can take many different forms, and especially for the Global Talent Visa, I don't think that there is a set format of what you can highlight in your personal statement, because everyone's experience is different and you would tend to adopt an approach that aligns with your experience and that can help you to sell yourself as a global talent. So what I'm sharing is what I wrote for my personal statement, which I believe was convincing enough for me to be granted the endorsement. In the subsequent videos, I would also share 2 additional personal statements from friends who have generously agreed for me to share their personal statements. So I'll walk you through what I captured in my personal statement. I think the first thing that you have to mention in the personal statement is, of course, to emphasize that you are applying for endorsement for the Global Talent Visa through the promising route. Then you would proceed to briefly introduce yourself. Here, the introduction should be specific, targeted at what is your background. So here you highlight academic qualifications that you hold. I would advise against talking about your bachelor's. I started by talking about my master's degree and also my PhD. Here, I didn't just mention the subjects that I studied, but I also mentioned what the course entailed and how relevant it is in terms of making me a global talent. So for example, I talked about the fact that in my master's degree, so let me just quickly touch on some of the things. So I talked about the fact that I am a land economist with an interest in how the built environment, mainly land, is acquired, registered, planned, developed, used, and governed by households. So I introduced my background that I'm a land economist, and to give benefit of doubt to those who don't know what land economists, I want to say what land economists do. And then I said my MPhil dissertation evaluated the progress Ghana has made in terms of consolidating its land sector agencies to improve land titling. And then I proceeded to also talk about what my MPhil was in. That is, it was in planning, growth, and regeneration, which I studied at the University of Cambridge. And then proceeded to talk about what my PhD was about, and that I said my PhD focused on understanding how land use planning and land administration systems bring together and then impact on the proliferation of gated communities. So here I have given them my disciplinary background, which shows that I have got a qualification. So I have got an MPhil, I have got a PhD in subjects that are very relevant: urban housing, real estate for the UK, but as well also for developing countries. Now, the next thing I did was now to emphasize more or delve deeper into what I do on a daily basis, which is a researcher. So I am a researcher, I'm not a teacher. So I rather decided to go deeper into the research that I do, the different strands of research. So I started off with the 3 years that I've been a postdoctoral researcher, the kinds of research I have done. Not just talk about the research, but also what has been the output from those research and how has those output benefited the United Kingdom. So I said, for example, that over the past 3 years, I've strongly demonstrated that I'm a global talent in research with more than 15 publications to my credit. I mean, it's important I mention that because that also shows the contribution I'm making towards the scholarly community. Now, I said that as a postdoctoral researcher, I have designed and led the execution of 3 interrelated research projects on smart cities. Now, I've got multiple research projects that I've led on, but I thought this was one research project that if I anchor it, it can help me to actually market myself as a global talent, because I had produced output from this research which has been of national relevance. So I thought I could leverage on this to be able to make my case stronger. So, for example, I went in to say that the first project proposed a novel co-creative framework for conducting stakeholder engagement for smart city development. Then I said that some of the key output from this project include a national guidance document, which is titled Stakeholder Engagement for Smart Cities and Digital Infrastructure Projects, and also a review of stakeholder engagement in smart city initiatives in 4 UK cities. Now, I didn't just mention the title of these research projects, I also hyperlinked them so that the panel, if they are interested in actually reading, they will be able to click the hyperlink and it will take them to these documents. These documents are of national significance because one is a national guidance for the UK in terms of smart city, and one is a stakeholder engagement, which I think are 2 critical documents demonstrating my interest in research. Now, that was the first project. So I adopted a project by project basis in terms of talking about my research. So that was the first project. I said that insights from these outputs have been drawn upon by academics developing the West Cambridge Digital Twin Project at the University of Cambridge to guide their stakeholder engagement. So I didn't just say I have produced this output, but I also went ahead to say how useful these outputs have been and who is using them. So it was almost like the similar approach to the second project. I talked about the second project seeks to shift the focus of the current smart cities ethics debate away from big data, the entire governance of smart cities. I led a project that used Smart Cambridge program as a case study to highlight how ethical choices are made by city leaders when deciding on. I was very intentional here. I mentioned the Smart Cambridge program because Cambridge is a pivotal city in the UK. It's a center of research innovation. So for me to do a research project where I have chosen the Smart Cambridge program as a case study, for me was important to highlight so that it will come across as if even the case studies that I choose for my research are not just random, they are strategic, they are intentional, and they are of cities that are of significance. So I used a similar approach to talk about what that project did. So for example, I went on to say that this project serves as a valuable resource for city leaders who are leading smart city projects, and it provides city residents with relevant information to help them hold their city leaders accountable. Now, what I'm saying here is that I also try to highlight not just one key stakeholder who benefit from my research, but potentially different stakeholders who can benefit from my research. It's important to demonstrate that the research you are doing as a global talent is not just targeted at one person, but it could have wider societal impact and benefit. And I even mentioned that for this particular project, I have published a paper in Urban Study, which is one of the very, very top tier journals in planning and urban study. And I provided a hyperlink of this where the panel members can follow that. So it almost followed the same thing for the third one. Now, beyond the research, I also decided that, okay, I also do teaching. So it's important I emphasize the teaching dimension and my contribution to teaching, because as an academic, I do some aspect of teaching, which is also a contribution towards students' intellectual development and learning in the UK. And that also demonstrates the contribution I'm making towards students' development. So I included a paragraph regarding teaching that I have done. So I talked about, for example, in addition to conducting research, I have a rich experience in contributing to teaching in higher education, and I mentioned specific subjects that I have taught. So, for example, I mentioned I have taught micro and macroeconomics at the Cambridge Ruskin International Colleges. Because of the word limit, I couldn't go on and talk about the teaching subjects that I've taught even within my department, and the summer schools that I've taught and all that because of time. But all that I'm saying is that aside the critical piece of information, which is the research that I do, I also mentioned that I also do teaching, which aligns with the role of being a global talent in terms of academia and research. Now, I didn't also just talk about teaching. I also went on to talk about grant writing and also being successful at grant application. So I mentioned that I have experienced and I have achieved some success in terms of winning scholarships and grants, and I went into mention specific examples. So I talked about my Cambridge, for example, both Cambridge Trust and the Cambridge Africa Scholarship awarded me more than 180,000 scholarship to fully fund my MPhil and my doctoral degree. So it's important, if your studies was even funded through a grant or a scholar, it's important to mention that, because it shows that you are a high achiever, you are a competitor, you are a winner, for you to be able to emerge out of a pool and then be given a scholarship. So I think that is important. But beyond that, even as a researcher, I've won Cambridge Alborada grant, I've won a UKRI grant. I try to mention that in my statement and also talk about the specific projects that those grants were mentioned. So your grant writing, your funding experience and other things should also be highlighted. I also went on to highlight individual achievements that I have chalked. So, for example, I mentioned that on 2 consecutive occasions, which is in May 2018 and May 2019, I received the Best Presentation Prize at the Early Career Researchers Conference at my department, which came with a cash sum of a certain amount. I even went on to say I was the first candidate in my cohort to finish my doctoral program in exactly 3 years. Now, this is not a boast. It is to market yourself, to say that you are really committed and that if you are given the opportunity, you would really excel, because your track record suggests that you are indeed a high achiever and everything that you do, you bring your best to it. So don't feel like, oh, am I being boastful? No, you are not being boastful. You are actually marketing yourself. You're actually making a strong case that you are very competitive. You are somebody with a purpose, and your track record evidence that indeed you are a global talent. So apart from that, I just then tied in everything to say that if I'm given the opportunity, I would be able to continue even building upon all these impressive activities that I've been doing in my field and make a significant contribution towards the UK in the area of academia and research, but even more importantly, to make a contribution globally, particularly from Sub-Saharan Africa, where my research also focused on. So that was how I structured my personal statement. As you have seen, you might approach it in a different way, but I was writing it with the mindset that I am a researcher primarily. So I need to be able to demonstrate that I'm actually in the field, and I'm not just doing any random research, but I'm doing research that is of significance to the UK, the national economy of the United Kingdom. Now, a question that I believe some of you will ask is, okay, what if I don't live in the UK? I've never done a research on the UK. So does that mean that I cannot? What do I put in my personal statement? What I would say is, it doesn't matter if you haven't done any research on the UK. You are a researcher, and researchers draw on the work of other researchers globally. So your work could have relevance even though you haven't studied about the UK, but what you have studied on, irrespective of the country, would have significant relevance for research, for teaching in the UK. So it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it's about how are you trying to make a case that the research you conduct and wherever geography you focus on is indeed having an impact, or could potentially have an impact on teaching, research, academia within the United Kingdom and indeed globally. And I think that is really the pitch. So I am just probably fortunate to have been in the UK and having done my PhD, my master's, my postdoc in the UK. So in conclusion, I would like to emphasize that yes, you can adopt a different style, whether you have an introduction, body, argument, conclusion. But for my approach, what I did was I introduced myself. I made it clear which route I am applying for. It's important. It's important to state which of the routes you're applying for, because you can go for the exceptional talent or exceptional promise. So I was applying for the exceptional promise route. So I made it very clear. That was my very first line. I said, I am writing to apply for endorsement for the global talent visa through the promising talent route. So that was my first line. Then I introduced who I am in terms of my research, my academic background or qualification. So you go into your academic qualification. Then I said that I delved deeper into the research I conducted, because I am a researcher primarily. So of the many research I did, it was just 3 that I focused on. So I delved deeper into that, but I also went beyond research to talk about teaching experience. And then beyond teaching, I also highlighted the fact that I also have achieved some individual successes and also won some grants. And then I made the case that given the opportunity, I'll be able to make a significant or substantial contribution towards scholarship, research, and education in the UK, but also globally. So that is the structure I adopted. Very simple structure, but then very, very poignant, very powerful. Yeah, so that was my format. So thank you very much. If this is your first time on this channel, I would encourage you to like, to share, and to subscribe, and also sign on, click on that notification bell, so that anytime we upload a video, you would be notified. And then, put down your questions you have regarding this video or other videos that we have, and then make time to address them. So thank you very much for watching this video and for going to share them. Thank you.
A new place, a new home for a while. Let me feel.